18M, former emo kid, dated my high school English teacher. 24F, small town drama, fired after a big mistake, and the life-altering decisions I had to make. Insert obligatory throwaway account disclaimer. You get the idea. I grew up in a really small town. Picture the most uneventful, middle-of-nowhere place you can imagine, some forgotten pit stop in a flyover state where nothing ever happens. Now, make it even quieter. We're talking neighbors half a mile apart, a single main street, one McDonald's, one department store, and a tiny movie theater with just 3 screens where everyone crowds in on Friday and Saturday nights. Church is mandatory on Sundays, and everyone either knows you personally or at least knows your business. The entire town's mood rises and falls with the high school football team. My graduating class? 60 students. Not because we were dumb, just because the school was that small. I never really fit in. By choice, mostly. Looking back at 26, I cringe, but back then, I was a wannabe emo/goth rocker. People still invited me to parties, though not necessarily because they liked me, there just weren't enough kids in town to be picky. My mom was the local baker, always making cookies and cakes for church, and when she wasn't baking, she worked as a hairstylist at the town's only salon. My dad, a retired Navy petty officer, ran an internet cafe for a while, but once even our little town got Wi-Fi, he turned it into a tax service. Business was slow, most people did their own taxes, but he and mom got by on his pension. In high school, I worked at a small, privately owned burger joint that struggled to compete with the town's single fast food chain. My boss constantly told me to get my hair cut, always muttering that I looked too much like a dang girl. No thanks, old man. So, with all this boredom everywhere, you can imagine the sensation Miss Amber Fontaine caused when the high school hired her to be the 11th and 12th grade English teacher. Miss Fontaine was of French extraction, and had moved to America in her later teens to go to college in New York. She was only 24, and very beautiful. She spoke perfect English, but did so with a very pleasant accent. Obviously, all the guys loved her, and lots of women hated her. She appeared oblivious to all the attention, however, and just stuck to her job. Really, we didn't know too much about her. She mostly kept to herself and nobody ever saw her hanging out with any men in town, and it wasn't for lack of the men's trying. It soon became clear that she wasn't into dating any of the men our city had to offer. Much later on I found out that she had just taken the job in our small town to gain experience, with a future goal of being a college professor in a big city. A sort of 2-year plan. Obviously I had a crush on her. We all did. It was and still is a small, church-going town, so nobody really acted out on his urges or tried to harass her or anything like that. As guys, we'd talk about how hot she was amongst ourselves, usual locker room stuff teenage boys do, but that was it. My one real out-of-school experience with Ms. Fontaine was when she stopped by the burger joint I worked at and saw me working there. She told me I had a nice smile, and that she wished I smiled more because in school I was always frowning, because I was in my emo, everything sucks phase. When the food preppers came up with her food and handed it to me to give to her, I was impressed and not at all surprised that she ordered a salad. She didn't strike me as someone who ate the greasier slop we sold there. In school the following Monday she smiled at me in the hall and I smiled back. Then she said, "You're learning," but not in a condescending or patronizing way. Just a fun, kidding way, and I exchanged a smile with her every time after that. And that was the extent of my great, high school romance with Ms. Fontaine. Exchanged a few hellos and smiles during my senior year, when I was 17. Things changed the following year, though. I was 18 and still working at the burger joint, when Ms. Fontaine comes by the restaurant. "Oh hey, OP," she says, and asks with real seriousness, "Are you going to college?" I tell her the truth, well, mostly. I'm playing guitar in a band, a phase I now cringe at, working, and kind of saving money for community college. That last part is only partially true. In reality, most of my money goes toward weed and ecstasy. Aside from me, our so-called band consists of just 2 other members, Jerry, the bassist, and Gabe, the drummer. Both had just graduated high school, like me, and none of us had any real plans for college. Gabe and I worked at the same local burger joint, while Jerry, ironically one of my best friends from high school, flipped burgers at the fast food chain down the street. Our lives at the time revolved around wasting our youth, skateboarding, getting high, and playing in our so-called emo/punk/metal fusion band. Looking back, our sound hasn't exactly aged well. Ms. Fontaine tells me that now that she's in her 2nd year of teaching, she's getting the hang of things. She admits she wishes her current students were as engaged and well-behaved as I was. I never got stellar grades, but I consistently earned an A in English, mostly because I actually enjoyed reading. She says she'll see me around. A few days later, she stops by the restaurant again. We get to talking, and out of nowhere, she asks if I'd like to go see a movie. It's obvious she's bored, there's no one her age to hang out with in this town, or if there is, they're all lame. It just feels natural for us to spend time together. And now that I'm completely out of high school and she's no longer my teacher, we're both adults, I had just turned 18, and she had recently turned 25, so, why not? So, that's how it started. We'd meet up in the early evenings, totally innocent, and go to the movies, or to dinner at the one good restaurant in town. Ms. Fontaine was cool about letting me slide when it came to paying for our dates because she knew I made minimum wage. It was actually me who started to push our relationship to the next level. After a while I started to hold her hand when we walked places, and finally we started kissing. Never in front of anyone. She taught me a lot of French words and phrases over the next summer and fall while we were going out. My parents knew I was sort of dating my former teacher, but since it was keyword former they didn't really raise any stink about it. Ms. Fontaine would always try to convince me to go to college, but she did see our band play a few times when we got a rare gig at the roller rink, and she was nice enough to not tell us what she really thought of us lol. We didn't have sex until we had been dating casually for nearly 2 months. That was my idea, too, but she admitted that she really liked me and she wanted it to happen ever since we reconnected earlier that year, after I had graduated. I'm not the kiss and tell type, but my bandmate sort of knew that the dynamic in my relationship with Ms. Fontaine, she had been Amber ever since we first made out, had changed. They appeared cool with it. I stopped doing so much dope and really began putting money away to save for college. The JC near my house was super cheap. Amber would often tell me she thought about applying there for work, but said that she really wanted to move to the West Coast, or back to the East Coast to teach at a college. Eventually, she told me she'd like me to come with her. After a few months, I was in love with Amber and she was in love with me, too, she said. We didn't throw our relationship in people's faces or show public affection, but it's not like we pretended not to know each other, either. Amber had come around the house and my parents really liked her, and thought she was a great influence on me. I didn't exactly cut my hair, but I was neater and more presentable, and eventually I really did begin enrolling in GE classes at the local 2-year. But then, things went downhill fast. Out of seemingly nowhere, Amber got called in for a meeting with the local school board. This is my secondary account of the situation, as Amber was the one there, not me. There had been reports that she was dating a former student romantically, they were talking about me. And that she was having a sexual relationship with said student when he was still a minor and still attending high school. Of course, she denied everything. Of course, they believed nothing. She had sent me a desperate text, and since ours is a small town, I think I've mentioned that a couple of times already, I was at that meeting in literally 10 minutes. I told them the truth, I had been in Ms. Fontaine's class during my senior year, and that was the extent of our relationship at the time. I explained that we reconnected months after graduation and only started dating then. And most importantly, I was over 18. The board's response was essentially, "Look, son, we appreciate the effort to defend your friend's reputation, but we need the full truth, not just carefully chosen details." I insisted that I wasn't leaving anything out or trying to hide anything. After a lot of back and forth, and a few tears, Amber was given a warning. They told her it wasn't appropriate for a teacher to be seen with former students off campus, even if there was nothing inappropriate about the relationship. We figured that was the end of it. Still, we couldn't help but wonder who had complained in the first place or who was spreading rumors that we had been involved while I was still a minor. By this time, I was living at Amber's apartment. I contributed my share of the rent, of course. I had even met her parents, though only over webcam. They were good people. They didn't speak much English, but Amber filled in the gaps for them. They knew my age, and they were fine with it. We assumed it was just small-town gossip and that it would eventually die down. We couldn't have been more wrong. In the weeks following Amber's meeting with the school board, the rumors about her escalated. I won't insult your imagination, you can probably guess the kind of things people were saying. Then, one day, my boss at the burger joint told me he had to let me go. Something about the store losing money and my hairstyle driving away customers. Yeah, sure. Amber reassured me that it wasn't my fault and promised to support me while I looked for another job. But then one day, SHE got fired, too. She was working as a probationary teacher. It meant that during her first 2 years, she could be fired for any reason, and actually, no reason had to even be given. Explanations were for those who earned tenure. We both knew why she was getting fired, but the district strongly implied that it was simply because she was an ineffective teacher. In her defense, I looked at the data on the district website, and the number of students from our school who did well on standardized tests in her subject area leaped by double-digit points during the time she was a teacher there. Her numbers were far above the state average, and to this day, since her departure, those same scores have nosedived. Amber told me that students tended to respond well to her, and she was very popular among the students. It was true that she was immensely popular when I was a student, and I'll assume the same carried true the year after I graduated. Aside from the obvious fact that she was eye candy, she was simply a good teacher, and a good person, and that's why the kids liked her. Lots of students threatened to riot when she was fired, but being the non-dramatic, non-attention-seeking person she is, Amber asked them to just focus on their studies and doing well, and helping their new teacher adjust when he or she arrived to take her place. My dad told her she ought to sue the district, but Amber didn't want the drama. Besides, she said, she was allowed to resign so that it wouldn't show up on her record as her having been fired. Also, she said that the district promised not to try to revoke her teaching credential. Her own parents suggested maybe she ought to come home to France, but she insisted on sticking it out in America. My parents were cool in that they offered to let her move in with us while she figured her life out. She's lucky that her parents are well off, because they gave her some money to relocate to California. She asked me please to come with her, that she loved me, and we could start new there. I've always wanted to move to California, so I jumped at the chance. My parents were happy that I was in a relationship with a good person who obviously cared about me, and gave us some money, too. We got an apartment together in the Los Angeles area. Neither of us drove, so we both got bikes to get around. Our new area was a world apart from my old life, though I know Amber's own teenage years were in Paris, so Los Angeles wouldn't be as much of a culture shock for her. I quickly enrolled in a local community college and got a job as a waiter at a popular French restaurant. The unique thing about our place was that some of the servers spoke French, and because Amber had taught me a lot over the past few months, I became a popular server for bringing that authenticity to the experience. Unfortunately, the school district had misled Amber about her teaching license. While they promised her that it wouldn't be revoked, they neglected to mention that they would place an official reprimand on it, accusing her of inappropriate conduct with students. So, whenever Amber applied for new teaching jobs, this would show up as a major red flag on her applications. Another strike was that her past job termination was labeled as forced resignation to avoid termination for cause. Amber, who's 7 years older than me, didn't fully grasp just how cruel people could be, but I had seen enough to know what we were up against. Every time she applied somewhere, doors slammed shut. She appealed to the state licensing organization, but after months of waiting, there was no resolution. Calls to her former school just led to dead ends. For months, I shouldered most of our daily expenses, though we were greatly helped by loans from both our families, without which we wouldn't have made it. Then one day, Amber told me, "You know what? Screw trying to teach in public school. Oh, and I'm pregnant." So, we had two pieces of good news. Fast forward many months, and Amber and I are happily married. We had a beautiful wedding in sunny Los Angeles with both of our families there. For our honeymoon, we went to France, where Amber was pregnant with our son, Richelieu. I'm about to finish my associates in information technology, and I've been promoted to maitre d' at the restaurant, which now comes with health benefits for my wife and son. We live in a large studio apartment, which suits us for now. Amber stays home with Richelieu but also teaches online French and English courses for a private school. While she's blacklisted from teaching in public schools, she's still able to pursue her passion. More months pass, and I got my first job in IT, troubleshooting computers for a small company downtown. I make double what I used to at the restaurant, and my employer has a program where I can finish my BA while I work, and they will subsidize 50% for free, and the other 50% they will dock from my pay in small monthly installments. Sounds like an amazing deal, and I take it. We move to a bigger apartment. Amber is making her awesome contribution both as a mother and to our finances with her tutoring. We're planning for her to eventually go back to school for her graduate degrees so she can finally fulfill her dream of teaching college. Oh, more good news, OP. I'm pregnant again. Life is sweet, haha. So, while everything is going awesome, one day I get a text from Mom. She was at a local school board meeting with her neighbors, regarding a bill proposal to hire more teachers. Apparently over the past few years, the population has grown, and the high school needed to expand. So now it's a two-horse town, Mom says. While she was at the meeting, my mom ran into Jerry's mom. Jerry, the bassist from my old band that I quit once I got into a serious relationship with Amber. My mom never met Jerry, or his mom. Or at least in a way that connected them to me. The reason was, because I never brought Jerry around our house. Because, for a couple of years, Jerry was my drug supplier. He had the hookup for anything you wanted. Well, what does all this have to do with anything? My mom doesn't know Jerry's mom, but she hears her and some other lady talking about me, and Amber. My mom heard them saying that Jerry had been the one to tell everyone about Amber and me supposedly having sex before I graduated, and his mom went straight to the school board. Their names as informers were protected under confidentiality. I had lost touch with Jerry over the years and had stopped playing music with him long ago. I knew he resented all the time I was spending with my chick. It's unfortunate because he used to be such a good friend of mine. It really hurt to find out that he was behind getting my now wife, the mother of my child and soon-to-be children, fired from her job. Jerry's mom was a teacher at Amber's previous school. It became a running joke between us that Jerry's mom was so uptight about maintaining a prim and proper image, acting like the perfect teacher whose actions were above reproach. Yet, her son Jerry, a student at her school, was basically the biggest drug dealer in town. Looking back, I also realized Jerry probably had a thing for Amber and resented that I got to be in a relationship with her, while he didn't. Maybe it's because she knows what's good, you jerk. I later found out that Jerry's mom had joined the school board. I didn't immediately tell Amber everything, but I did ask her what she remembered about Mrs. Jerry's mom. Amber told me that Jerry's mom had always been rude to her, and was one of the main people who rallied the other adults on campus to exclude her from social events. This was one of the main reasons Amber didn't connect with the other teachers. She told me that while the male teachers were generally nice to her, the female teachers seemed to despise her from the start. Amber also mentioned that Jerry's mom had even started a petition to prevent her from being rehired for a second year, which was news to me. Evidently only a few female teachers signed the petition, but the petition was placed in Amber's permanent file as evidence that the staff lacked confidence in her. They were basically setting her up to be fired even though she was doing a good job teaching, and the students liked her. Well, I'm more Cali than Iowa these days, but I still keep in touch with a few kids, now grown up, I knew in school, including Gabe the drummer from our old band. From what I hear, Jerry manages the burger joint I used to work at, because the old guy who owns it retired. I have a social media account but only use it to contact people in emergencies. I never update anything. My profile is practically blank, online. I'm not one of those people who checks it daily or uploads pics of my lunch. Didn't post about marrying or having kids or moving to LA. I told the people that matter directly. Jerry was still my friend on social media even though we stopped talking ages ago, so I clicked on his profile. Yep, he definitely managed my old place of employment. I clicked on his friends and family's profiles and recognized his mom, my old history teacher. She was on the school board now. Sanctimonious as ever. I think I mentioned before that I came from a small town. And in a small town, there often isn't anything for bored kids to do other than do dumb stunts and do drugs. And for the biggest loser kids of all, a group that included me, we were dumb enough to record ourselves partying and talking sh*t and doing the aforementioned drugs. That's exactly what my band used to do all the time. Whenever we had a show, we'd go around taping ourselves using our cell phones. We'd take video of us rocking out, skating, drinking beer in the vacant lot, and take video of us getting high. We'd also talk to the camera. I haven't thought about the old recordings in years, but I never erased them from my old phones. I'm the kind of guy who hoards his old cell phones, not because I think they'll increase in value or that I find them especially interesting, but I kind of think of them like file cabinets of my past, because I don't erase anything. Aside from phone numbers, I don't really transfer data from one phone to its successor, easy as it would be. My current boss knows I used to do drugs, and they don't care. In IT, I'm told, everyone used to get lit, and many still do. I casually ask my wife if her new job knows about what happened back in our old town. She says they do, but it doesn't matter to them. All they care about is that she teaches high-level conversational French, which is what their clients, many of whom are traveling professionals, demand. She tells me that some of her coworkers even have serious criminal records, but her employer believes in giving people a second chance. Alright, that's fine. So, I go through some of my old videos to find what I need. I don't have trouble finding footage of Jerry getting incredibly high. It seems like that's in almost every video. In most of them, he brags about how his parents know he's a drug addict and dealer, and how they want to send him to the army to make a man out of him. The specific video I'm looking for isn't on this phone, though. Maybe the LG? Nope, just more of Jerry on ecstasy at a rave we snuck out of state to attend when we were in 11th grade. What about my old Galaxy? Bingo. There it is. Jerry talks about how his mom is fully aware of his drug use, and how sometimes she even smokes weed with his dad. He mentions how they caught him with cocaine once, yelled at him, and his dad even beat him up, but then Jerry came home the next day to find his mom coked out on the kitchen table, having called in sick that day. The video even has a timestamp. That should do it. I don't tell Amber though. It would only upset her, especially with her being pregnant. Instead, I ask my mom for the contact information of everyone on the school board in our old town. I already know the school's email, and since I graduated not too long ago, many of the administrators are still working at my old high school. I still have their emails. I create a disposable email account, attach the relevant videos, and send them to everyone who matters in that town, the teachers, administrators, even from the elementary and middle schools, the church, the pizza place, the burger joint owner, the roller rink manager, you name it, they all get the files. The files where Jerry exposes himself as a coked-out drug dealer, with his mom having full knowledge of the fact, and her husband even indulging in the drugs themselves. The next day Amber asks me, while she's feeding our son, "Honey, why are you so happy?" I tell her, and she starts crying. "No, I'm not sad," she assures me. "I'm just so happy you did this for me." Then me, Amber, Richelieu, and our bun in the oven go for a walk because it's such a nice day. Still need a haircut. Not getting one. Do I even need to say what happened afterward? All this ancient history shouldn't matter. But in a small town, it's devastating. The videos are just of Jerry talking trash, who knows if he's even telling the truth? Doesn't matter. In a small town, gossip becomes gospel. Kind of like how everyone believed Amber and I were F***ing before I turned 18, even though that was 0% true, and they ran us out of town on a rail. My parents had to endure the fallout of my disgrace when I left town years ago with that French tramp, as all the idle busybodies have dubbed my wife. Mom and Dad made their peace with it and have numbed themselves to the slurs, and always stood up for us. They are what's good about small-town America. Jerry lost his job. The police raided his house, which was really his mom's house, and found a ton of drugs. When the rumors about Mrs. Jerry's mom having a drug-dealing son spread, kids who got busted for drugs at the high school eventually caved and named him as their supplier. Who would have thought? He really was telling the truth. Now, he's facing jail time, you jerk. His mom was fired from her job and blacklisted for being a drug user, endangering children, and committing fraud as a public official. My mom didn't have all the details, but there's a chance Jerry's dad could also face jail time. It also came out that Jerry's dad had been cheating on his wife for years with a woman from their church. The entire family is now persona non grata. They want to leave town, but they're stuck because of the court case. Until then, they'll just have to deal with everyone's hatred. I'll just hate them from far away. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone, or at least their business. So, eventually, word will get out, and people will stop pretending it's confidential and realize I had a hand in taking down a whole family. I don't care. Jerry, are you hearing this? Good. Come at me, bro.